Hey, welcome back. This is Merey and Mark. We're chatting marriage, we're talking mental illness, and we're talking family. If you listened last week, and we very much hope you do, there's one thing that I needed to mention about our last video. I didn't realize how much of a cranky face I wear a lot of the time. Like, I was watching the video and I realized I look mad at you. I'm not, though, am I?
No, I told him that was his normal face.
That's that's a hard thing to realize about yourself, that when you talk to people, you look at them like you hate them.
You don't hate me.
It's because I'm a radio person. I've never had to think about my voice, so about
your
how I
face.
look.
Your
Yeah,
face.
yeah. And you're very much a visual cue person. You take a lot of cues out
I
of people's
do.
faces. Yeah?
Absolutely. I always think that can always work to your advantage by doing that. Probably not so much with you, but other people that are not you.
So it creates misunderstandings with your husband, with everybody else. Okay, so I guess last week we talked about finding out that I had a mental illness.
Mhm.
What we wanted to do this week is Mental Illness 101 Part 2.2, which is what happened next. So obviously it's all about connecting with doctors, yeah?
Absolutely. Your specialists, your psychs who can help you, all of those good people.
Okay. So we mentioned before that we actually started out with our general practitioner, our GP. In Australia, that's the first point of call. You show up, the GP is not an expert in those things, but they'll refer you to an expert.
That's right. That's standard process. I don't know what it's like for
Other countries,
other countries
but
and how you operate, but in Australia, it's a requirement to always have a referral.
okay. So let's talk about the process of getting help. Did I, at the time, did I understand, did I show you that I knew that something was wrong and that I wanted to get help?
It is going back a way. I'm just trying to
Well,
remember
what's your
the
impression
earliest.
of that time? Did I ever say to you, I'm not going to a doctor? There's nothing wrong with me.
No, I don't remember you ever saying that. I don't believe that you were ever comfortable with seeing the psychologist. I can't say that. I can understand that. I can imagine that most people wouldn't feel comfortable going to see a psychologist talking about their feelings, particularly when you're in the middle of a mental health crisis like you were.
Yep. But I never said, to the best of my understanding, I never said, I'm not going. There's nothing wrong with me. I'll just get over it.
I think that's more because you were just going through the motions of it all.
Mm.
You have to think you're going through a full mental health episode at the time.
Mhm.
It's not as though you had that mindset or in the right mind in general to then say, I don't want to do this or I do want to do this. It was more like riding the wave. Oh, now I do this and now I do this.
Mm. So, do you recall what your role was in that? In getting me to doctors, to making appointments? Do you recall at all?
I feel that my job was to handle all of those bits and pieces for you.
Uh-huh.
So know when the appointments are going to be, set them up, make sure that I give you a heads up. I had to prep you so that you knew that they were coming up, to get yourself mentally prepped to know that you're going to have to talk to somebody,
Mm.
so that by the time you got there was no surprises.
It's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? That you know you need to go to the psych for help, but it's never easy to go.
Well, no, it's not easy to go. Um, I know I know for some they really benefit from getting things off their chest.
Mhm.
I think that you and I might actually be the same there. And I know we're talking about from care and mental health perspective, but I don't like going to talk about my feelings. I often find I feel more upset
Mm.
after going to the psych and talking about my feelings. And for you, I know that you struggle desperately to really delve into the things of your mind and the situations that caused them and upset you and still continued to upset you.
Mm. And it was exhausting, wasn't it? I always came out of them very, very tired.
Oh, of course, because it's quite an emotional, well, you say this all the time, an emotional roller coaster.
Mm.
And it is. And it actually is. It's important to remember that it's an emotional roller coaster for both parties. So the person, so yourself who's dealing with the mental health condition,
Mm.
and the other person who's there to try and support you through that as well.
At what point did you start to get involved with the actual appointments? When did you start sitting in on appointments? And do you recall, was that a conscious choice that we made?
I remember being there from the beginning,
Mhm.
from the very beginning. You didn't stick with the same psychologist because we moved in a state. So therefore we had to change psychologists as well and doctors.
Yeah. Well, and if you remember, so I was injured on Melbourne Cup Day, November?
So it was, yeah,
Whatever,
in November, whatever day
November
in November that
2006.
a horse race happens on.
Yeah. So it was right before Christmas, and I saw a bunch of psychs before Christmas, and they were
Yes.
mostly terrible.
Yeah.
And then we found a great one, another woman actually. Um,
Again, that was recommended by the chief GP.
yeah,
So what you actually did is some workplaces like yours offered you to speak with their counselling service,
yeah, that was a waste of time.
and so you did, but that would never have been enough to help you.
Well, it couldn't be, because they actually said at the time, "Look, your problems are too severe. We can't help you."
Mm,
So that was, what was it, EAP? I think it was. So that was a real success story for EAP.
mm.
Um,
I mean, mind you, they are a counselling service. They're not. I believe they're trained counsellors, not psychologists. But that aside,
yeah,
we
but
got
it's
to the
all,
right person in the end.
well, we did because of the GP.
Yeah.
And then we moved cities. We, financially, we were just kind of destitute. We moved back home, so that you would have family around to help us look after the kids. Now, what did you see your role as being when you sat in the interviews, in the sessions?
I think from a carer's perspective, it's really important to hear what the psychologist or the psychiatrist is saying to you
Mhm.
so that you're getting that information because, as I always say, information is power, and it is.
Mm.
We talked about in our last chat, we were talking about how difficult it is because at the beginning you don't have any of the information.
Yes.
By going to sessions with a trained psychologist or psychiatrist, then you're able to hear what the strategies are. You hear the way that they spoke to you,
Mhm.
because there is a method and a way in which to communicate, and it's a teaching process,
Mm.
as well as helping to put a voice to what the problem is. Because I sometimes think as a carer, it just helps to understand, to know what you're going through.
Mm. The best way
Um,
to do that is to sit in the sessions, isn't it?
you have to be there and you have to be a part of it. Otherwise, how are you meant to cope? How are you meant to navigate through a person with mental health
Mm.
like yourself? When a person is really, really struggling, you won't remember most of it, but sometimes they're very, very angry for no particular reason. A lot of the time, they're very closed off and they don't want to talk. What do you do
Mm.
in that space? Because as a carer, you're still on the outside of that mental health circle trying to live life,
Mm.
particularly if you have families. Um, so I think it's vital. I can't stress it enough to get that information because it does help you and it helps you to feel, oh, I want to not say empowered because that sounds really dorky, but
Maybe involved? You're not a bystander. You're part of.
You're part of the solution.
Yeah.
You're part of the treatment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does,
Yeah.
because I think you said that the problem is you're watching from the outside. You don't know what to do. And I know that you saw psychs even without me, saw my psych.
Mm. Again, in Australia, they allow you to go and visit the psych, and it's covered for 6 sessions.
Yep.
So I took my 6 sessions
Yeah.
and went. I actually do find that there's value in that. You can be having a lot of troubles, perhaps a lot of resentment. I know at that particular time it wasn't so much aimed at you, but I did have a lot of resentment because I was isolated and alone. And yes, I was lonely and I needed to vent that. And it's a perfect platform. You've got a person who is paid to sit there and listen to you whinge about things. It's an amazing concept.
And especially if they know the person that you're caring for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you have to do that. It's pointless going to a separate psychologist again when the majority of your feelings are probably about the whole circumstance that you're living in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about me before mental illness. We moved around a lot. We lived in a lot of different places. Was that lonely without me, with me, like being fully functioning, or
Not for me, but I'm an introvert. I I don't have that need for contact, as you know.
yeah.
I don't seek it. I'm happy in my own company. I know. It sounds so awful.
But even with all that, what was our relationship? Were we, to my mind, for 99.99% of the time, it was great. We got on, we
Oh, absolutely.
laughed, we
Yeah,
had
absolutely.
conversations, we did
Yes.
things together.
Well, we were our own family unit.
Mm,
So I relied on you, you relied on me, vice versa.
yeah,
And we were both working full time.
yeah, yeah. So I get hurt and I start to fall down this mental illness hole, and all that changes, obviously. Did the move, no, I don't want to go there. Don't want to talk about
Okay. Oh, well, I don't know what you're going to talk about, so I
yeah,
can't
no,
say
I
anything.
just whatever it was, I don't want to talk about it. Not on camera. And isn't it funny, as honest as we want to be, there are times where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you about that.
Yeah.
Not with each
Although
other, but outside our circle.
although if there's anyone listening who's even a little bit like me, they're all now sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, what was it? What were you going to say?"
Yeah, no, it would no, I was just going to ask you a question and it was too leading. It was going to
Oh, that's okay.
make
That's all
you
right.
say things that I would understand that perhaps listeners wouldn't. So let's talk about the memory thing. This was really interesting. A couple of people asked it about this after the last thing. Our daughter, who has a mental illness, she likes to say that she has memory loss as part of
Memory
her
loss issues.
as
Yes.
part of her mental illness. What is it actually? Because you've mentioned a few times that I would misconstrue things and misremember. What's your take on that whole subject?
Um, Now, of course, this is just from a carer's perspective.
Of
I'm not a
course.
trained professional. What I could even see on your face is you would hear information, but from what I saw, because of where you're at with your mental health, it wouldn't process right in your head. So therefore, you would hear things that weren't correct. You would interpret people's tone incorrectly. The whole lot.
Is there any specifics, without embarrassing me too much, that you can think of, or is it too long ago?
When it came to actual sessions, I can't remember detail now.
Mhm.
I I can only remember, I'm just trying to think. I'm thinking out loud. No, I can't. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I know that having you there to help when I made an agreement with the therapist, when they said, okay, this week you're going to try and do this, I found that most helpful because you were on my back about it as well. It wasn't just up to my memory.
Well, that's right. So the first stage that you actually went through was to do with dealing with the incident that happened and and getting you to rethink about that so that it became less of a problem because of it's exposure therapy, basically.
Yeah.
So that particular circumstance was then in your mind not as huge as it was in that moment because you couldn't move forward and you couldn't actually put in active strategies until you dealt with that first point.
So still dealing with the fallout of the critical incident.
That's correct.
Okay.
So you went through exposure therapy first.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that exposure therapy was you being recorded talking about the incident, and then you had to keep re-listening to it.
I don't remember that at
Yeah, you
all.
did. You had to keep re-listening to it because it's exposure therapy. So you have to keep, you had to actually spend certain times each day re-listening to it.
Hmm.
And whilst it is reliving it, the more you do it, the less impact it has on you.
Yeah.
So you had to do that first. And then after that, it was then down to working out strategies, things that you can put into place in order to not go to extremes.
Hmm.
What that means is when people go through mental health episodes and they go from 0 to 100 in a very short amount of time, it was about you recognizing when it was starting to become a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you first start out, you don't know where that midway is.
Yep.
And then starting to put the strategy in place the moment that you noticed that your mental health was starting to kick in and it was going to get to a point where the horses bolted, basically.
Yeah.
And then you would have to distance yourself. So you're trying to constantly work on that by doing grounding exercises and all sorts of things. My role in that
Mm-hmm.
was to help remind you.
So to prompt me.
That's right. You mentioned at the beginning of this chat about how I watch people's faces.
Mm.
And it was a lot about watching you, figuring out where you're at the beginning.
Mm.
I know that we'll talk about later on about how we've got this ongoing conversation and checking in that we do now,
Mm-hmm.
but that wasn't actually part of that at the time. So I just had to watch you. Sounds creepy, but yes, and figure out which mark I had.
Okay. Okay. I just can't even imagine it. I can't imagine what it looked like from your side. Just how terrible it must have been. I've said it a million times. If you had have at any time said, even today, if you said, "Nah, I've had enough. It's too much for me. I'm leaving," I couldn't find a good reason to get you to stay. You know, it has been terrible. It's been horrible, and I've just, at least I've been going to places and 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 feeling like I am at least trying to walk up the hill. You've just had to deal with me. I don't know how you do it, to be honest.
I think the difference is knowing that the person who's suffering wants to go and get treated. They want to try and get better.
Mm,
They don't want to be this person who's trapped in their head
mm,
all of the time
yeah.
and never able to participate in life. Even now, I have to just say, even now, sometimes, because I struggled with this concept for a while, because you said to me, you never feel really happy, but you never feel really sad.
Mm,
And I know for me personally, knowing that you never felt really happy, that was a little bit of a struggle
Mm.
in knowing that. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, oh, but he doesn't feel really sad.
Mm.
So that's a win.
Mm.
That's good.
Do you think that's still the case?
Um, I actually think through going to therapy, putting in your strategies and working on it and wanting to work at it and wanting to be more.
Mm-hmm.
And we always used to talk a lot about being normal on back to yourself. But I think you did come to the reality that where you're at now is the best version of you
Mm-hmm.
with your mental health, and you're okay with that. And I'm okay with that.
Okay, as in not finished, but just okay with the being all right with being okay at the moment.
You're all right with being okay
Mm.
and realizing that who you are now is you.
Mm. Yeah, not this idealized version of myself.
That's right. Because obviously the way that we look at ourselves is flawed.
Yeah,
So I think the way that we've worked together on that though.
yeah. All right, so this is a conversation, but I'm truly interested to know this. I'm kind of clicking into interview mode. I'm just wondering what you would say your best friend called you up and said, "My husband's been involved in this horrible, horrible incident. He's completely broken." What's your advice then, particularly going through the process that they found out that something's wrong? What are you going to try and do? What's your hope of what your role's going to be in that relationship now?
Well, in fact, I have been contacted
Hmm.
by my friends. I have. That was more in line with their own personal struggles.
Yep.
If it was a circumstance where they were calling me, like you said,
Mm.
and wanted to know what to do,
Hmm.
it would be a lot of the steps that we've talked about in our previous chat and in this chat so far.
Mm.
I would say to them um, to go to their doctor, to start that process of getting a referral to go and see a psychologist
Hmm.
and just get onto it straight away. But you need to go see the doctor first because there's the potential that if they are truly struggling, there could be some medications to even them out a little bit.
Which is what I think I got.
That's right.
I think they put
That's
me
right.
on some anti-anxiety or
Yeah, just it's real basics, real
yeah,
foundation things that they normally put you on, and it progresses from there.
yep,
However, having a little bit of medication can sometimes smooth off the edges enough if you have to have the space to be treated in the first place.
yeah,
So that's what I would recommend that they do. And of course, my usual in this whole process for them to look after themselves.
yep. How do you protect yourself without leaving? Because there's a very, very fine line, I think, between mental illness and domestic violence. At what point, because I know you never made this choice, I know you never felt physically unsafe
No,
when I was
I
around.
I didn't feel physically unsafe. That's is important to say.
Okay.
It is important to say.
So even though I was angry, you knew that I was not going to inflict that anger on you?
It's hard when you say inflicting anger because when someone's angry, they're still inflicting their anger on
Yeah, that's
people,
true.
whether it's physically or not. You're still inflicting your anger. So just we all need to be aware
Yeah, no, that
of that.
it's a good distinction.
Um, Physically, no, never, and I don't think you ever would. That would mess with your core foundation of who you are.
To engage in domestic violence.
Yes,
Really?
I think so. Yes.
That's a really nice thing to say.
You're welcome. But it's true. It's true. So you would never have done that. Um, but as we also know, there's lots of different forms of domestic
Domestic
violence.
violence,
So
emotional, financial withholding.
Yeah.
There are many, many things that in mental illness look like domestic violence when you look at them from above, if you look at it without emotion. So, how did you deal with those parts of my mental illness that were encroaching on domestic violence? Because while you were never physically in danger, I know that me getting loud and shouting, um, particularly at our kids, is well, it's unpleasant for you.
Mm.
Um, I've always said when we first got married, I came from a family where if you had a disagreement, it was loud, it was hard, and it was forceful, and it was
Mm.
screaming, it was shouting, it was throwing things, but it's just what we did.
Yeah.
Tried to do that with you the first time something little came up. I did a bit of a, "Bah," I arced up, and your face, I saw on your face something that horrified me, scared me to my core. You were a little bit afraid of me. And of all the people in the world that shouldn't be afraid of me, it's my family.
But I also come from a family where we're all passive aggressive. So we don't do that. There's no shouting. There's firm words.
So there's that polar opposite there. But why did you never put my loudness down as domestic abuse? My shouting, my anger. I mean, I do think I came close with the kids. Just the times when my anger really got away from me.
Mm.
Um, but why did you never go, hang on, this guy is now a perpetrator of domestic violence and I need to leave? So it comes back to that question that I asked originally. Why did you feel safe enough to stay?
I think that you're thinking when you're in these moments, you have that much time to dwell and think on it,
Yeah.
which I don't think you can really afford to do when you're trying to help someone
Mm,
with mental health issues.
yeah.
It really is by the moment,
Yeah.
by the day, and so on, and breaking it down. So if you really dwell on it, and I'm sure some people do, I just don't think you would make it to the next day.
Mm,
I think you need to engross yourself in getting through that day, getting through those moments to the next moment. I've told you many times, you always ask me why did I stay, because I always believed that the person who I knew would come back.
mhm.
I always said that, and I believed it. So I stuck in there knowing that that Mark had to be in there somewhere and he had to come back.
Has he come back?
I think so. Yes. Different
Well,
Mark.
very, very different.
Very different. But yes, because the person who you became was just mean and angry all the time.
Uh,
All the time. Um, because you were so sad. And I can understand why you were like that. But I can also understand why you would ask that question. Why would I stay in that? And I do think a lot of people
don't stay.
don't stay. But there's a lot of people who don't get treatment. They don't go onto medication, or they don't take their medication. And you just have to. You have to look after yourself. Meaning the person with mental health needs to do this. They need to swallow up their pride and take that medication. In order to, if they don't want to do it for themselves, do it for the people who are around you, who have to live with you each day.
Hmm,
It's hard to live with a person with mental health.
hmm.
It's a daily struggle.
How did you learn to not personalize it? You said last week about you don't get caught up in my emotions. How did you learn to keep your distance from Mark's really, really, really sad, so I'm going to be really, really, really sad with him,
Mm.
or he's not happy, so I can't be happy. Um, do you,
It's a hard thing to learn. It's very, very hard, particularly if you're dealing with a person who you've known as a larger than life. So when they walk in a room, they're that type of person who walks in the room and they just dictate the tone of the room.
Did I do that?
Yeah, very much all the time. Yeah, and you still can, you still do.
Oh,
So how you feel is then how the whole house feels. No, it's just how it is. Um, and it was only through time um, and learning a few things that I decided not to. But I don't have a mental health issue myself, so I can say that. I can say I choose not to do this. I choose not to feel the way you're feeling, be in that place where you are.
mm,
Um, Also, in our other chat, I mentioned about that there is nothing you can do. You can't fix that person. And I have to say it again because it's very, very, it's just so important. You cannot fix. I couldn't fix you.
mm.
I can't stop you from being sad when you're sad because the condition chooses when that's going to happen, and then you put your strategies in place. Blah blah blah, and it's a waiting game till you come out the other side of that. Does that make sense?
It
It
does.
does?
It does. I
Okay.
mean, it's a hard reality. It's hard to hear. Um,
Yeah. And something else you mentioned in when you were talking before is about coping.
mhm.
How did I cope?
Yep.
It does come back to not ever thinking about it in too much detail because that would make it impossible. The other thing is along the way, um, at particular points, I would have people into my life who I could talk to
Mhm.
and who I could vent to, which was important. And I wouldn't say that I had like a group of people. I'd have one person, just one, but it was enough to then be that person who you could cry on their shoulder type of situation.
Yep.
Um, and honestly, and you're going to feel so terrible, but there were some moments where I just did a lot of crying on my own
Mm.
in in bathrooms, out the backyard, doing gardening, that sort of thing, to try and have that moment away from it.
Mm.
I hate saying that to you because you always get really
No, no, no.
thoughtful and
And but
unhappy.
it's necessary because if somebody's listening to this, our pain has to have a purpose.
Mhm.
If we went through everything that we went through and we never talked about mental illness again with another person, then I think all that time is wasted. But if we can potentially say something that somebody hears and goes, "Oh, hang on, I am like that. I didn't realize that that's who I am,"
Mm.
carer or sufferer,
Yeah.
then that's why it's so important for me that we talk about this stuff.
Mm.
I guess it's interesting because the one thing that you don't seem to do, and I think this might be the key to why you never thought about leaving, is you never seem to blame me. You never used to look at me and go, "My life sucks and it's your fault." You blamed, I think, the mental illness, the incident, but you never looked at me and went, "You are the cause of all this.
Mm.
This is your fault that I have to go through this."
I think for the most part that is very true. It doesn't mean that after 10 years of being saturated in a situation that you don't build up some levels of resentment.
Yeah. Well, you have to. There's no
Yeah,
way you can't.
it's just not that's not practical. It's going to happen and you're going to feel that way because you're saying to yourself and thinking at times just how desperately unfair it is.
Mm.
So unfair on the person suffering and equally unfair to the people who are caring.
Yeah, we might talk about that sometime. That would be
Yeah.
an emotional one about the many things that were unfair about our situation. But I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to mention today?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered what we need to. Of course, I think if anyone has questions,
Yeah, please drop them in the links, the comments, whatever. We will answer them. We will get to them. Um, thank you just doesn't do it. To say thank you, it's never enough.
You thank me every time I talk.
But I am just grateful that you're with me. I was thinking the other day, I'm grateful that, well, I don't ever wake up and you're still in the bed because I'm a late person, you're an early person.
Yeah.
But when I go to bed, I'll often look at you and just go, I'm so grateful that I get to sleep next to this amazing person. So, yeah, thanks, mate.
Thank you. I hope I'm not snoring in those moments. That's kind of a spoiler, isn't
It's cute sometimes.
it?
Alrighty, we'll catch you next week. Subscribe, like, and share. Help us get the word out about the conversation, and drop us a comment if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, or suggestions.
Absolutely.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Shattered the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.